As a musician, the idea of casting spells by playing instruments always excited me. I loved how Mabinogi, one of Nexon's MMOs, allowed players to map out notes in a score sheet and play anything from Code Geass's Orange to the Harry Potter theme, Michael Jackson's Thriller. It was awesome. To me, they perfectly captured the Bard's flavor, although I think mechanically they could have done a better job. Now, Final Fantasy XI captured the mechanical essence of a bard. Someone who sings or plays songs using instruments to influence the battlefield without dealing direct damage. Now, although both games handle bards differently, the core identity is still there. Something I think is completely missing when I play D&D. Bards get instrument proficiency, so I know they're supposed to be musical casters, or at least they're supposed to be musically focused. But they don't get any songs, compositions, or even an excuse to use their instruments. And the weird thing is you don't even need to play the instrument to cast spells. You just have to have your hand on it and you're okay. Bard is looking pretty sus. See, the Bard class strikes me as a versatile caster. A versatile class in general. They can use weapons, heal, wear armor, deal damage on the battlefield. Just not as good as any of the other classes can. And before you tell me that bards can do these things as good as the specialized classes can, just don't. There was no way a bard can heal as much as a cleric, or bot more people than a fighter with multiple extra attacks with a glaive. Maybe clerics aren't the best example because they're pretty busted, easily the best class in the game, but the bard class can't even compete with the DPS of other spellcasting classes either. Like, they have a feature called Jack of all trades. You know, master of none. Wait a second. A class that can support, deal damage, and use swords. That reminds me of something. That's the red mage from Final Fantasy XI. Bard's the imposter. Whatever class is in that player's handbook is not a bard. Like, they really had me here making a video talking about why I hate a class that doesn't exist. No. I should have known the moment I saw that bard's key ability score was charisma. Like, everyone role-playing bards pretend that musicians are bubbly and sociable people. I'm a musician, and while we can be charismatic, we are not bubbly and sociable. Pretty chill, but we're not that. But we are knowledgeable about sheet music, chord progressions, understanding time signatures, and the various forms of whatever key it is that we're playing in. Things like C blues, C minor melodic, C pentatonic, all that stuff. And even musicians that are self-taught know this stuff. They just might not know the exact names for it. They might intuit the stuff, but they still memorize everything. Now, if you think of that and realize that musicians are less likely to have Alzheimer's, just like people who are really good at math, then you start to realize that being knowledgeable and skillful are more important things than being charismatic when it comes to being musical. And again, I'm taking this musical angle because they give bards proficiencies with instruments. But look at the performance skill. That's charisma based, but it doesn't matter how much you can hype up the crowd or build anticipation if you can't hit the notes right. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying performance doesn't help. Performance skills can help, but it's not the most important thing. Not even close. Intelligence should be the main ability score for bards. And hold on, I'm gonna explain why, along with some things that you could do in your games to make bards again. But first, leave a like if you're liking the video and subscribe, or I'll tell your party that your bard made it into the player's handbook through event. Now, I understand that charisma is supposed to represent the power that comes from within a character, something like sorcerers with bloodlines. By the way, I'm really against having someone's stat that they use for spellcasting be the same stat that they use to be strong with social encounters. Social encounters is reason enough to put points into charisma. Adding spellcasting on top of it just makes it ridiculous. And the reason why I think intelligence would represent bards better and also make them more flavorful is because it represents someone's ability to recall and store knowledge and how quickly they can do it. For wizards, the source of their knowledge is represented in a spellbook. They have to memorize spells every day. Warlocks get a mysterious patron. Maybe they don't know about their patron or what have you. Either way, they're drawing power from whatever that entity is. Imagine how cool it would be to play a character that discovers the lost lore of the world. Compositions of music that were once played by ancient beings or the gods. Suddenly, your bard's also a lore master. And that is way cooler than playing a promiscuous drunkard that hits on anything with legs. And now you can build motivations for going on an adventure just from that idea alone. Your character can set out on an adventure to uncover the world's lost knowledge, or they could be like Rise from the League of Legends lore, who collects artifacts, powerful magical artifacts, so that others don't abuse their power. Your character could be the same, but just with musical compositions, understanding just how powerful these things are. Or you could set out on a journey to locate the compositions that you made so that you can regain your power that you lost cost that was stripped away from you after an encounter with an ancient entity. Not only that, but you don't have to roll amazing stats now or play as a wizard in order to have good history, religion, etc., etc. stats. You can recall knowledge using another playstyle. Here's another idea: add compositions to your game. How much effort and creativity you put into this idea is up to you. I'm going to give you some examples of me just reskinning spells and certain features that are already in the game. Leave all the healing and the normal spellcasting to all the other classes, to the clerics and the paladins. Instead, this version of a bard will be making big moves so that the party doesn't even need healing in the first place. This could be through compositions that buff allies, debuff enemies, or control the battlefield in general. The key is to make these compositions function as prolonged AoE. These AoE songs all require concentration, and every round your bard can use an action to continue playing the song, or stop playing the song and go do something else, or switch to another composition. Because there will be a radius in which the song affects those around them, the bard will have to pay attention to their positioning, and this will make combat more interesting and dynamic, and less of those situations where people are really just standing out in certain areas on the battle map and they just found places where they perch up and do their thing. Frontliners are in the front, the mages are in the back, and they really only move when they have to. Even then they could just misty step, so who cares? But this class really has to think about where they're going to stand in the battlefield to get the most value out of their spells. Not spells. They'll use spell slots, but they're compositions. And if you want an added twist to this idea, you can make it so that all creatures within the radius, 30 feet or whatever you choose, will be affected and gain the benefits of the song. So enemies might get stronger if your bard isn't careful. This will make things really interesting, I promise. It'll allow your intelligent players to really flex the skills that they have. For example, if an enemy hobgoblin is trying to close the distance in such a way that they will gain benefit from your song of inspiration, you could switch up on your turn and play a song that they can't benefit from. Now they're in a bad spot for no reason. Mind you, making spells into compositions would increase their duration since they might not just be instantaneous. And that means your bard would usually gain value over about 3 rounds of using a song. So you have no idea how much I love this idea. So I actually thought of a few compositions myself that maybe you could use, tweak to your own benefit. So the first one you already saw me mention is Song of Inspiration. Basically, you expend one of your inspiration dice as well as a spell slot, because all these songs should require you using a spell slot. You expend them and you can extend the duration of how much someone can benefit off of inspiration. So basically, people are around you, 30 feet, whatever, and instead of you giving one person a d6 to roll, everyone around you will be able to use that d6 as long as they are within your range. Maybe to make it more balanced, you could just say every round as you're sustaining it, those within range of you gain an inspiration dice. So you're essentially just giving more people inspiration dice, including creatures that are enemies, but it's, again, AoE, you're sustaining it, and it's just better. By the way, I don't think it can be a smaller die like a d4 if you're trying to make it a little weaker, because then it would just be a worse bless. So next is Zaya's Resolution. You can insert the relevant name of an entity, a being, or a god in your world before the word resolution. But this one is simple. Once you play and sustain this song, you give those around you temporary hit points. It could be a 1d12 or whatever, kind of like the ability, the Protector Turret one that the Artificers usually get. Except it's not busted because you're using an action to do this and not a bonus action that you usually wouldn't use. I need to make a Why I Hate Artificers video. Like, I've allowed them in my games and every time I've regretted it. Definitely making that video. Another composition could be the Darkness spell, but you make it so that darkness follows you. So there's, again, 30 feet around you, and when you move, the darkness moves. Still have to spend an action to sustain this composition, but you can use a bonus action to expend one of your inspiration dice to give one of your allies Devil's Sight for 1 round so that they can gain the benefits of the darkness and really take advantage of it. I think I'm really liking the idea of sustaining an AoE effect and using your inspiration dice to strengthen, focus, and empower your songs. Okay, one more. This one will be called Dreadful Memories. It's a song filled with violent and harsh tones, almost like someone raking their hands against a chalkboard or playing a violin with the bow sideways. As the bard continues to play the song, the melody creeps into a fast, sharp, and jagged rhythm. Think of how Soul plays the piano with that demon in the room in that anime Soul Eater. A bunch of color tones weaved into the melody. Creatures must make a saving throw if they start their turn within the bard's range. Again, you choose the distance, and be paralyzed until the start of their next turn if they fail. But of course, if the bard is still in their range at the start of their turn, they're going to have to make that saving throw again and possibly be paralyzed again until the start of their next turn. As a bonus action, of course, the bard can expend one of their inspiration dice to to choose a creature and makes that they don't have to make a saving throw even if they're in range. Talking about this stuff gets me excited. It's already so much more flavorful than anything you're going to get from the D&D Player's Handbook as far as Bard goes. And it's only of me looking at spells and features that already exist in the game and twisting them a bit to make them prolonged AoE effects as compositions. Like, I truly think that these mechanics for compositions bring more flavor and a more fulfilling game loop to the Bard playstyle than what's already there. And for DMs, you have another reward that you can give to your players at the end of an adventure or quest or at reaching the end of a dungeon. Naturally, since these compositions can get you so much value with only one casting or one use of a spell slot, because even though they're sustaining these spells, it's not casting it multiple times, I would suggest making bards, I don't know if they're half casters, a short rest caster essentially, like a warlock. Give them as many spells as a warlock gets. And be sure to make it so that bards can only cast compositions using bard spell slots to avoid multi-class abuse. Also consider giving them their inspiration dice back on a short rest, or at least half of them, since they're going to be using them a lot more. And it's up to you, but I would consider making it so that bards can only cast compositions, because that would make them unique compared with any other spellcaster in the game. They can get cantrips, sure, but that's it. If they have enough compositions to choose from, it should be no problem. And be careful, be very, very careful of giving a bard healing with these compositions, because you don't want a persistent and constant healing word on the battlefield, unless you like playing whack-a-mole. Let's see, hit dice, armor, weapons, and proficiencies are fine as they are, I think. Now, making compositions might seem like a lot of work, but if you're a lazy DM, you could just shove that work onto your players. Encourage your players to make compositions of their own, ones that they think they're gonna like, using what's already in the game as a frame of reference for balance, and present them to you so you can continue to tweak and balance those things to properly fit your game, and continue to do all the other things that the DM does, which is everything else. And with that, we made bards again. Hopefully now you understand that I hate bards in D&D because they don't exist flavor-wise or mechanically. If you removed the proficiency from instruments that they don't use and put in the title Red Mage, it would fit completely and no one would notice anything that would be a little bit off. Now, you're probably new here. I'm Locke Lamora and I'm a professional dungeon master, and here on this YouTube channel I make D&D and Pathfinder content every weekday. That's not true. Every week, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And I know I keep saying that the podcast is coming. I probably sound like the Starks right now. Winter is coming. But it really is. I won't bore you with all of the crazy, nightmarish technical difficulties I've been facing, but I'm starting to believe that there's something out there that really doesn't want me to upload this podcast. Anyways, it's gonna be out when it's out. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.